Okay, now that that cute little grain has cooled, we can continue assembling the motor. Okay, first off, it can be pushed out of its little mold with a pin or whatever's handy, and then unwrapped. Let's see what we've got. See how nicely it unwraps? It makes a nice smooth coating on the outside. Now we need to document this grain. First off, we want to know what its mass is. So I'll get my little scale on, throw it on, and see. 7.0 grams. I'll write down weight, 7.0 grams. We want to know its length. Caliper tells us that it's 1.419 inches. Outside diameter, well, it may vary, so I rotate it and tend to take a minimum and a maximum. I may even do it at different spots. It looks like it comes out to 1/2 inch to the penny, well, slightly under a penny. So its outside diameter is 0.48. And the cord, we want to know how big that is. Here, I'm not real concerned about it as long as the igniter will go in. 0.174. Okay, time to load the casing. Our grain is hard, we know its dimensions, we know its mass. So here's our case with the nozzle intact, a little aluminum foil seal in place. We just pick one end. Whichever end has a better centered hole in it, I would say, should go in first. And then that gets pressed down all the way against the nozzle. Now you can see all the way through. Isn't that cute? All the way through. Can you? Let's see. Oh, no, you can't, because there's an aluminum foil seal in place. Oh, well, that's the dumbest thing I do today. We're doing better than average. But we do need to do an undumb thing, and that's to put a little paper seal on top of the propellant grain. We do that by cutting a square of paper about 3/4 of an inch. You can measure it if you like. And then trim off the corners to make a crude octagon. I've got an irregular octagon here, so let's clear it up. Okay, and put this over the end of the tube. Get your ram and mash it down. The reason we trim those edges is so we don't have points sticking up real far. We want to make a nice tidy little seal. I don't know if you can see that, but it's there, and it seals the upper end of the case. The purpose of this is twofold. We're going to press propellant down inside this top end to make a burn-through delay grain, but we want to make sure it stays separate from the propellant grain, and that paper separates the two. Also, we want this to burn through. That's why it's just a single sheet of paper, so it burns through rather easily once the bottom grain is ignited. Thirdly, we're going to be putting epoxy on the inside of this tube, and we don't want that epoxy to drip down inside here. So that little piece of paper is a very important thing. Please do not omit it. If you do, substitute something for it. Okay. It's a simple tool that I've developed that makes the gluing of the header grain much easier and much more uniform. It's made with a short piece of motor tubing. This is one that's actually full length, but it was kind of bad on one end, so I'll use the other end. It'll be fine. And it also uses about half of an index card. So I'll cut that off. And then roll it around the dowel. This is a 3/8 inch dowel, 1/2 inch inside diameter tube. That makes the roll nice and smooth. Once I get it done, I can roll it around the dowel and insert it in the casing. And this makes a smearer that smears the glue inside the tube. So to get this to stay nicely, I'll use a little bit of Elmer's. Doesn't take much, just a little glob. And spread it around. Shove it in where about 1 inch of this is sticking out. Expand it where it fills best possible. And let it dry for a couple of minutes. Okay, and then in a few minutes when we are ready to insert our header grain, we will spread epoxy on this part, stick it in the tube, and turn it around. That spreads the epoxy nice and evenly on the outside edge of the tube, but not on the paper seal that'll be in the middle. So, go ahead and plug. I've squeezed out a little bit of epoxy here. I'll find my stirring stick and mix it up. This is plain old 5-minute epoxy. Now, to get the inside, the head inside of this tubing coated well without coating the paper down below, we'll use a new little tool that I developed and smear some epoxy on the outside of it. Then we simply insert it in the tube, twist it around a few times, withdraw, and look, and see how it's coated pretty well? I don't see any dry spots in there. I think it's done a pretty good job, but just to be really sure, I'm going to put a little bit more epoxy here. Put it in again, twist, twist, twist. Make it go down and twist a lot. Okay, and I assume that's done pretty well. So now it's time to glue the header in. That's a little bit of our propellant. So I've got some warming in the pan over here. Let me grab a little glob, set it down, handle it lightly so that I know it's not so hot as to stick to me. Okay, that works pretty well. A little bit crumbly, so I'm going to work it some. The more you work it, the better texture it gets, at least until it cools down. So we work it some until it's nice and modeling clay texture. Make a little slug, drop it straight in, and then find the dowel to ram it down. Ram it down nice and hard. Okay. So the propellant is in direct contact with that little slip of paper, no epoxy in between. We'll make another little glob of propellant, ram it down, nice and hard, hard and even. Okay, and then get the rest of our epoxy and make a nice layer on top. Make sure we cover the edge, the end of the paper, all the way to the edge. That seals it. Then I'm going to scoop off the extra epoxy and let everything harden for a few minutes. The head end sealed with epoxy, and it's set pretty well. It's time to finalize it. This is sealed tight so it can't burn through. So we need to drill a little hole through the epoxy so that the flame can burn through and ignite the ejection charge. Notice as I drill this, you begin to see red stuff coming up. That's a hint that we've gone through the epoxy and we're drilling into the propellant. To make sure, I'll clear the way here. A way to test is get a sharp little knife thing. You can scrape and kind of hear the scrape. You know you've hit propellant there. So I'll get all this other stuff out of the way. And we're finally ready to seal this one up.